Listen to me, right now you have a version of yourself holding you back. A version that whispers excuses, hides in comfort, and settles for less than you're capable of. That weak version is stealing your dreams, your energy, and your potential, and it will keep doing it until you decide to stop. Today is the day you look in the mirror and say, no. Today is the day you break free from hesitation, distraction, and fear. Today is the day you kill that weak version of yourself and step fully into the unstoppable, powerful person you were born to be. You can't change your life until you first get radically honest about the version of you that's been running the show. And for most people, that version is the weak self, the one that negotiates with excuses, that hides behind fear, that delays action because comfort feels safer than progress. That weak version isn't evil, it's just familiar. It's the voice that whispers, do it later, when you know you need to do it now. It's the part of you that would rather escape in a distraction than face the discomfort of growth. And if you don't identify it clearly, it keeps controlling you in the shadows, quietly shaping the life you settle for. Most people walk around thinking they're making choices, but they're not. Their weak identity is making the choices for them. Every time you procrastinate something you know matters, that's not you. That's the weak self. Every time you downplay your potential, every time you shrink your ambitions because you don't want to fail, that's the weak self. Every time you know what the right action is but choose the easy action instead, that's the weak self. And the moment you shine a light on that part of you, the moment you call it out, everything begins to change. Because now you're no longer living blindly. You're confronting the truth that the weak version of you has been blocking your greatness. You have to see clearly how this weak self has been showing up in your daily life. Look at your routines. Is it the strong you waking up with purpose? Or is it the weak you hitting the snooze button because 5 more minutes feels good? Look at your health. Is it the strong you choosing discipline or the weak you rationalizing unhealthy habits? Look at your relationships, your career, your goals. Everywhere you find inconsistency, hesitation, or avoidance, the weak self is in control. And you can't transform what you're still protecting. You can't conquer what you're still justifying. You have to expose the patterns that have been holding you back. And here's the truth that many people never want to admit: the weak self survives because you feed it. You feed it with your attention. You feed it with your doubts. You feed it every time you tell yourself you're tired, you're overwhelmed, you're not ready. It's not the right time. The weak version of you loves indecision because indecision is where dreams go to die quietly. It loves comfort because comfort keeps you exactly where you are. It loves when you compare yourself to others because comparison keeps you passive. And as long as you keep giving the weak self energy, it will keep running your life. But the moment you identify it clearly, ruthlessly, something powerful happens. You create separation. Suddenly, there's a you who watches the excuses instead of becoming them. There's a you who feels the fear but doesn't surrender to it. There's a you who recognizes the old patterns and says, not anymore. That awareness alone is the beginning of transformation. Because once you can see the weak version of yourself, you can challenge it. You can confront it. You can starve it. Think about the times in your life when you knew you were capable of more. Those moments where a spark inside you said, I'm meant for something bigger. That wasn't the weak you. That was your true self trying to break through. But the weak self always rushes in with stories. Be realistic. Don't push too hard. What if you fail? What will people think? And because those stories feel comfortable, because they protect your ego from discomfort, you listen. Not because you aren't capable, but because that weak identity has been louder than your truth. That ends today because you cannot build a powerful life with a powerless identity. You cannot step into greatness if you keep letting the weakest part of you make the decisions. You have to recognize that every breakthrough you want, every transformation, every goal, every achievement requires you to kill off the version of you that settled for less. You cannot negotiate with it. You cannot reason with it. You must outgrow it. You must outwork it. You must become so aware of its patterns that you catch them the second they show up. And here's the beautiful part. The weak self isn't your enemy. It's a reminder of where you started. It's the raw material you get to evolve from. Without it, you'd have nothing to rise above, but it is not the version of you that is meant to lead your life. The stronger you, the disciplined you, the focus-driven, unstoppable you, that version is waiting for the moment you say, enough. And identifying the weak self is the first step, because once you see it clearly, you can finally choose who you want to become. And in that choice lies the beginning of everything. Because the moment you expose the weak version of yourself is the moment you begin to bury it. Now that you've seen the weak version of yourself, the one holding you back, the one making excuses, the one comfortable with mediocrity, it's time to shift your focus. Because identifying what's weak is only the first step. The next and far more powerful step is creating a crystal clear vision of who you are meant to be. I'm not talking about a vague idea of improvement or a wishful thought. I'm talking about a vivid, detailed image of your strongest self. The person who refuses to settle, the version that takes massive action, the version that refuses to negotiate with fear or doubt. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine it. Picture yourself as the person who never lets distraction steal your focus. Picture yourself as the person who has mastered your habits, your emotions, and your energy. Picture a version of you that walks into every situation with confidence, clarity, and purpose. What does that version of you look like? How does that version of you think, speak, and act? What are the standards that person lives by every single day? If you can't see it clearly, you'll never hit it because your mind only works on what you can define. Most people never do this. They float through life reacting to circumstances, hoping motivation will appear, hoping inspiration will strike. But motivation is fleeting and inspiration is temporary. The person who transforms is the one who has created a mental blueprint so precise, so detailed, that it becomes a magnet for action. When you can see the strong version of yourself, your brain starts to work for you instead of against you. Your decisions begin aligning with that vision. Suddenly, what once felt impossible starts to feel inevitable because you have a target, a non-negotiable ideal you are moving toward. Now, this isn't about arrogance or pretending to be perfect. The strong version of yourself is still human, still capable of mistakes, still vulnerable to challenges. But what sets that version apart is that it refuses to stay small. It refuses to accept excuses. It refuses to settle for less than what it is capable of. That version of you knows that discomfort is not the enemy. In fact, discomfort is the fuel for growth. That version of you doesn't run from challenges. It seeks them because it understands that challenges are the pathway to mastery. And that version of you understands that the weak self may whisper, "You can't." But the strong self answers, "Watch me." To create this vision, you must dig deeper than surface level goals. It's not just about earning more, achieving more, or looking better. It's about the person you become in the process. Who do you need to be to handle the life you desire? What kind of courage, discipline, and resilience must you develop? What patterns of thinking habits and routines will define you? You have to map it out. The more precise you are, the stronger the pull toward action. Your vision becomes not just an idea. It becomes a standard, a set of non-negotiables for your life. And once you define it, the weak version of yourself has no choice but to crumble under the weight of clarity. And here's the key: this vision must feel irresistible. It must stir something deep inside you that refuses to be ignored. When you see the life you are capable of living, the impact you could have, the growth you could achieve, the person you could become, it should feel almost like a calling. It should make the excuses of your weak self seem absurd. That vision has to be so vivid that every day you wake up and feel a tug toward it, a pull that drives your actions even when you don't feel like it. That vision must become your compass, guiding every decision, every effort, every move you make. But creating this vision is not enough unless you start acting as if you are already that person. You must step into the identity you want to claim. You act like them, you speak like them, you think like them, even when the weak self resists. Every small choice to act in alignment with your vision chips away at the old, weak identity and strengthens the new, powerful one. It's in these repeated actions, these tiny daily victories, that the strongest version of yourself begins to emerge. And when you consistently operate from that identity, everything in your life begins to respond. Opportunities, people, circumstances, they all align with the clarity of your vision. Imagine waking up each morning and feeling unstoppable because you know exactly who you are meant to be and exactly how you're going to show up. That's not a fantasy. That's a reality you can create when you commit to building the strongest version of yourself in your mind first and in your actions second. And as you do, the weak version of yourself, the one hiding in fear, hiding in comfort, starts to fade because it no longer has a foothold in your life. It's replaced by someone bigger, stronger, bolder, someone who refuses to be defined by limitation. And so the moment you can see that strong version of yourself clearly, you can no longer settle. You no longer tolerate compromise with mediocrity. You no longer make excuses. You move differently, speak differently, act differently. That vision becomes the energy that drives every choice, every habit, every decision, until you are no longer dreaming about who you could be. You are living it. Because when you have a clear vision of your strongest self, you stop asking what if and start saying, this is who I am becoming. Now that you've seen the weak version of yourself and you've created a clear vision of who you are meant to be, it's time to confront the biggest obstacle between those 2 points, distraction and comfort. These two forces are subtle, almost invisible, but they are lethal. They are the silent killers of dreams, the invisible chains that keep you tethered to a life far smaller than what you're capable of. And here's the truth. Every person who fails to achieve their potential isn't failing because they lack talent, intelligence, or even desire. They fail because they refuse to break the loop of distraction and comfort that keeps the weak self alive. Look at your day. How much of it is spent reacting rather than creating? How many hours are wasted scrolling, binge watching, seeking temporary pleasure, or convincing yourself that later is fine? These are not harmless habits. They are the playground of the weak version of you. Every time you choose distraction over action, comfort over growth, the weak self gains strength and the strong self shrinks a little more. And the danger is that distraction doesn't feel like pain, it feels like relief. Comfort doesn't feel like failure, it feels like safety. But that safety is a trap, a slow poison that erodes your potential one day at a time. Breaking free from distraction and comfort requires ruthless awareness. You have to start noticing patterns, catching yourself in the moments where you are choosing the easy way over the hard path that leads to growth. Because here's the thing, the strong version of yourself doesn't live in comfort. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't negotiate with fear. It seeks the hard path because the hard path is where transformation happens. The weak version clings to comfort because growth is uncomfortable, unfamiliar, and sometimes painful. But discomfort is the currency of achievement. You can't buy success with comfort. You can't rent greatness with ease. And you certainly can't lease the life you're meant to live while you remain sedentary in the softness of habit. Every choice you make either feeds the weak self or fuels the strong self. When you allow yourself to stay distracted, you are feeding weakness. When you cling to comfort instead of pushing yourself, you are giving life to hesitation. And every time you give life to hesitation, you push your dreams further away. The strong version of yourself doesn't just reject this passively, it attacks it. It replaces distraction with focus. It replaces procrastination with action. It replaces temporary pleasure with long-term fulfillment. It understands that discipline, not desire, is the bridge between vision and reality. To truly break the loop, you must also understand the seductive power of comfort. Comfort whispers, you don't need to change today. You can rest a little longer. The world won't punish you for doing nothing. And it's tempting. It's so tempting that most people don't even notice they're living in it. But every day spent in comfort is a day where the weak self grows stronger and your dreams drift further away. If you want to kill the weak version of yourself, you must start saying no to the small, quiet comforts that make life easy but meaningless. You must start seeing discomfort not as an enemy, but as an ally, a signal that you are growing, that you are pushing the boundaries of who you've been, and that you are stepping closer to the person you are meant to become. This doesn't mean you need to throw yourself into chaos or pain unnecessarily. It means creating deliberate tension in your life, stretching your limits, choosing focus over distraction, choosing action over ease. It means designing your environment so that it doesn't allow the weak self to survive easily. Remove the triggers of distraction. Set the standards that leave no room for negotiation. Hold yourself accountable to the routines that build strength and momentum, because every moment of conscious choice is a moment where the weak self loses power and the strong self grows stronger. And here's the critical part. Breaking free isn't a one-time event. It's a daily commitment. Every morning, you must decide whether you will feed your weakness or feed your greatness. Every afternoon, every evening, every interaction presents the same choice. The weak self will always try to lure you back into distraction, back into comfort, back into the safety of mediocrity. But the strong self doesn't hesitate. It responds immediately. It recognizes the trap for what it is and chooses growth instead. Imagine what your life would look like if every distraction, every comfort, every excuse was replaced with focus, action, and relentless pursuit of your vision. Imagine how quickly the weak self would fade when it no longer has fertile ground to grow. That version of you, the focused, disciplined, unstoppable version, doesn't emerge from wishful thinking or fleeting motivation. It emerges from the repeated, consistent practice of breaking the loop of distraction and comfort every single day. The moment you decide that comfort will no longer dictate your actions, you take back control. The moment you refuse to allow distraction to steal your energy, you reclaim your power. And so the battle is not in the big, dramatic moments. It is in the countless small choices, the subtle actions repeated consistently, the moments when the weak self whispers and you refuse to listen. That is where transformation happens. That is where greatness is born. Because the moment you break the loop of distraction and comfort, you break the chain that has held your weak self captive. Now that you've confronted the weak version of yourself and begun to break the hold of distraction and comfort, there's another battlefield you must enter, the battlefield of belief. Because your results are not shaped by your circumstances, they are shaped by what you believe about yourself and the world. The weak version of you survives on limiting beliefs. It convinces you that you aren't capable, that you aren't ready, that success is for other people, not for you. And if you don't recognize these beliefs and uproot them, all the effort in the world won't move the needle. You can act for a while, you can push through discomfort for a few days, but eventually the deep stories you tell yourself will pull you back to the weak self every single time. Limiting beliefs are sneaky because they sound reasonable. I can't do it because I don't have enough experience. I'll start later because I'm not ready. I failed before, so I'll probably fail again. These are not random thoughts. They are a script that your weak self has been running for years. And the moment you repeat these thoughts enough, they become truths in your mind, and truths in your mind dictate your actions. You act according to what you believe is possible. And if your beliefs are weak, your actions will be weak, your results will be weak, and the weak self will continue to thrive, quietly running your life from behind the curtain. The first step in killing the weak version of yourself is to expose these beliefs. You have to become a detective in your own mind. Watch the thoughts that come up when you face a challenge. Notice the self-doubt that shows up when opportunity appears. Pay attention to the stories you tell yourself that limit your potential. Because the moment you see them clearly, you gain choice. Until you see them, they are invisible puppeteers pulling the strings. Awareness is the first weapon in your arsenal, because now instead of unconsciously obeying your limitations, you can challenge them, confront them, and replace them. And replace them you must. Limiting beliefs cannot be ignored. They must be replaced with dominating beliefs. Beliefs that push you forward instead of holding you back. Beliefs that tell you, I am capable of more than I realize. I grow through challenge, not shrink from it. Failure is feedback, not defeat. I am the one who decides my destiny, not circumstance, not others, and not fear. These are the beliefs of the strong self, the beliefs that make it impossible for the weak self to survive. Because beliefs shape perception, perception shapes action, and action creates results. When your beliefs evolve, your reality evolves. You don't just act differently, you see the world differently. You stop seeing obstacles and start seeing opportunities. You stop seeing limits and start seeing possibilities. But building these dominant beliefs requires more than just repetition of affirmation. It requires evidence. You must take action that proves to yourself that you are capable. Every time you push through discomfort, every time you follow through when the weak self wants to quit, every time you achieve something you thought was impossible, you are rewriting your internal story. Action becomes proof, and proof becomes belief. And belief becomes unstoppable momentum. The weak self hates this because it cannot survive in the presence of proof. Weakness thrives in doubt, but it dies when confronted with undeniable evidence that you are capable, that you are stronger than you think, and that your potential is limitless. And here's the truth: the beliefs of the strong self must be non-negotiable. There can be no room for compromise, no allowance for self-pity, no space for excuses. The weak self will always try to creep back in with old doubts, old fears, and old stories. But you must respond immediately. You must see those thoughts as intruders and reject them. You must consciously and consistently feed the beliefs that elevate you and starve the beliefs that diminish you. Over time, this becomes automatic. Over time, your mind becomes a fortress, protecting the strong self and leaving the weak self with nowhere to hide. Every great achievement, every powerful transformation starts in the mind. Your beliefs dictate how high you can reach, how far you can go, and how much of your potential you will claim. When you align your thoughts, your beliefs, and your actions with the strongest version of yourself, the weak self has no foothold. It cannot survive in a mind that is disciplined, focused, and empowered. And the difference between those who remain stuck and those who rise is rarely talent or luck. It is the courage to confront the beliefs that have been holding them back and replace them with beliefs that unleash unstoppable action. So ask yourself, what story are you telling yourself today? What lies have you accepted as truths? What doubts have you carried so long that they feel unshakable? And now ask yourself, are these stories serving you, or are they keeping the weak self alive? Because the moment you decide to rewrite them, the moment you replace them with dominating beliefs, you take a giant leap toward the life you were meant to live. You move from being reactive to being powerful. You move from being weak to being unstoppable. You move from being controlled by old stories to creating a new story, your story written by the strongest version of yourself. Because the moment you replace limiting beliefs with dominating beliefs, the weak version of yourself no longer has a home in your mind. Now that you've identified your weak self, created a vision for your strongest self, broken free from distraction, and rebuilt your beliefs, it all comes down to one critical principle: discipline. Discipline is the bridge between who you are now and the person you are meant to become. The weak version of yourself survives on inconsistency, on surrendering to temptation, on giving up when things get difficult. The strong self, the unstoppable self, is built on unshakable standards and ruthless consistency. If you want to kill that weak version, you must create habits, routines, and rules for yourself that are non-negotiable. Without discipline, your vision remains a dream and your beliefs remain words. Discipline turns vision into reality. Discipline is not a punishment. It is not some cruel restriction designed to make your life harder. Discipline is the tool that transforms potential into power. It is the daily choices you make repeated consistently that form the foundation of your strength. Every time you follow through on a commitment, no matter how small, you are building your muscle of self-control. Every time you resist the urge to settle for comfort, every time you choose action over ease, you are strengthening the part of you that refuses to surrender to weakness. Discipline is what ensures that your life aligns with your vision, even on days when motivation is absent, when desire is low, when the weak self is screaming for compromise. And here's the truth: consistency beats intensity every single time. You can feel inspired once or twice, but unless you take that inspiration and act on it every day, it will fade and the weak self will creep back in. Discipline is the daily practice, the repeated action that becomes automatic. It is waking up at the same hour, doing the work when no one is watching, making the small choices that build momentum. These small choices compound over time. They are invisible in the moment, but they create unstoppable results in the long run. And the weak self hates this because it thrives on short-term thinking, on immediate gratification, on excuses. Discipline starves it. Discipline leaves it no place to hide. Standards are part of discipline. You must decide what is acceptable in your life and what is not. Weakness thrives in ambiguity, in situations where compromise is allowed. If you tell yourself it's okay to slack off sometimes, you are giving the weak self permission to survive. If you allow laziness or distraction to creep in, you are reinforcing the patterns that keep you small. The strong self creates rules and lives by them. It doesn't negotiate with excuses. It doesn't rationalize failure. Standards are the framework that supports discipline. They are the boundary lines that protect the strongest version of yourself from slipping back into mediocrity. And discipline is more than just external action, it is internal. It is control. It is controlling your emotions, mastering your thoughts, and staying focused on the long-term results rather than the temporary comforts of the moment. Every time you react impulsively, every time you let anger, fear, or doubt dictate your behavior, you are feeding the weak self. Every time you pause, breathe, and choose action aligned with your vision, you are strengthening the strong self. Discipline is what keeps you consistent when life gets messy, when challenges hit, when the easy choice beckons. It is the glue that binds your vision, your beliefs, and your actions together. Habits are the building blocks of discipline. The strong self does not rely on motivation or inspiration to perform. It relies on habits that have been built and reinforced until they are automatic. When discipline becomes habitual, it no longer feels like effort, it feels like identity. You don't have to think twice about showing up for your goals because showing up has become who you are. The weak self resists habits because they require effort and discomfort. The strong self embraces them because they create freedom, power, and momentum. Every habit, every ritual, every standard you follow strengthens your identity and leaves no room for weakness to survive. And let's be clear, discipline is not perfection. There will be days when you stumble, moments when you falter, times when the weak self whispers, it's too hard. That is natural. What separates the strong self is the ability to recover, to recommit, to continue. Discipline is a long-term game. It is not a single act. It is a lifestyle. It is showing up even when you don't feel like it. Choosing excellence over comfort repeatedly, consistently, and without compromise. The more you commit to discipline, the smaller the influence of the weak self becomes until eventually it disappears entirely. Every goal you've ever dreamed of, every vision you've ever had, every breakthrough you've imagined, none of it will happen without discipline. Motivation is temporary, inspiration fades, but discipline builds unstoppable momentum. Discipline is the armor that protects you from distraction, the weapon that defeats weakness, and the bridge that carries you from vision to reality. The moment you commit to it fully, the weak version of yourself loses power, because discipline doesn't negotiate, it enforces. Because the moment you build ruthless self-discipline and live by non-negotiable standards, the weak version of yourself has no choice but to die. Now that you've identified the weak version of yourself, created a clear vision of who you want to be, broken free from distraction, rebuilt your beliefs, and built unshakable discipline, there's one final principle that ties it all together: daily reinvention. Transformation is not a single moment. It's not a one-time decision or a fleeting burst of effort. The strongest version of yourself is not created once and then left to exist. It is forged every single day in every choice, every thought, every action. You don't just kill the weak self once and move on. You must choose to reinvent yourself continuously, moment by moment, day by day. Every morning presents the same opportunity. You wake up and you can either feed weakness or feed strength. You can hit snooze and let the weak self continue running the show. You can rise and step into the identity you've been creating. That choice may seem small, but it compounds. The weak self survives on repetition, habitual unconscious surrender to comfort and distraction. The strong self thrives on conscious choice, on relentless commitment, on repeated alignment with your highest standards. Each day you choose greatness, the weak self loses a little more of its grip, and the strong self grows stronger. Daily reinvention is the ongoing war against mediocrity, and the battlefield is every moment of your life. Reinvention requires constant awareness. You must notice when old patterns try to creep back in, the excuses, the rationalizations, the fear, the hesitation. These are the whispers of the weak self, and they are relentless. But each time you catch them, each time you refuse to obey them, you strengthen the new you. You prove to yourself that you are not defined by past failures, by comfort, or by fear. You are defined by the choices you make today. And the beauty is that these choices, repeated consistently, become identity. Your habits, your actions, your standards, they are not just behavior, they are the proof of who you are becoming. Daily reinvention also means growth. The strongest version of yourself doesn't remain static. It evolves, adapts, and expands continuously. Every challenge you face is a chance to stretch, every setback a chance to learn, every discomfort a chance to grow. You cannot afford to be complacent. Complacency is the weak self in disguise. The moment you stop stretching, the moment you stop evolving, the weak self finds a foothold again. That's why reinvention is not a project with a deadline. It is a lifestyle. It is waking up every day with the intention to be better, stronger, sharper, more disciplined, more courageous than you were yesterday. And here's the truth: daily reinvention is not about perfection. You will stumble, you will falter, you will encounter resistance. That is inevitable. The difference is that the strong self does not surrender to these moments. It recommits, it recalibrates. It rises every single day and decides to show up with full energy, focus, and intention. This is how transformation becomes permanent. It is not a one-time event. It is the relentless practice of aligning each day with the person you are becoming. Every morning is a test. Every action is a test. And the only way to pass is to choose greatness over weakness consistently. Daily reinvention also requires courage. The weak self is comfortable hiding, waiting, rationalizing, and avoiding. The strong self steps into uncertainty, embraces discomfort, and chooses action even when the path is unclear. It is easy to live in the safety of old habits, old routines, old excuses, but that is not the life you were meant for. Each day you must decide, will you stay small or will you rise? Will you repeat patterns that hold you back, or will you forge new patterns that propel you forward? That decision, made repeatedly, becomes the proof that the weak self is no longer in control. And the most powerful part is this: reinvention is a daily declaration of ownership. You are no longer a passive participant in your life, waiting for circumstance, opportunity, or luck to dictate your path. You are actively designing yourself moment by moment. You choose your thoughts, your actions, your focus, your habits. You decide who you will be, and you commit to being that person today and again tomorrow and the next day and every day after. The weak self fades because it cannot survive under this level of conscious ownership. Its excuses, its fear, its hesitation, they are powerless in the face of relentless daily reinvention. Imagine the momentum that builds when you commit to this principle. Each day you show up aligned with your vision, your beliefs, your standards. Each day you refuse to negotiate with weakness. Each day you challenge yourself to grow over weeks, months, and years. The person you were transforms into someone unrecognizable from the weak self you once knew. That person becomes unstoppable. Not because of talent, not because of relentless daily reinvention. That is how greatness is forged, and that is how the weak self is finally buried for good. And so every day is a choice. Every day is a chance to kill the old, weak self and step fully into the strongest version of yourself. Nothing will happen until you commit to this principle with all of your focus, energy, and intention. The moment you treat reinvention as a daily necessity rather than a distant goal, the moment you decide to live each day as an opportunity to evolve, everything changes. Your habits, your mindset, your actions, they all align with your vision, and the weak self loses control completely. Because the moment you commit to daily reinvention, you no longer live under the shadow of the weak self. You rise as the person you were always meant to become.